Hi, welcome to episode 3 of the series of interviews we're doing at Universidad del Futuro, speaking to specialists and professionals of futures studies and foresight from different countries of the world. Today, I present to you a very special conversation I had with futurist Kristiina Paju. Kristiina is from Estonia and she lives in Finland right now. She finished her Master of Futures Studies at the University of Turku, and she also holds a BA in Education and a Bachelor of Business Administration. She is the founder of Futuro, an educational futures startup helping organizations and individuals to develop futures literacy. My conversation with Kristiina was a very interesting one. She talks about her time studying in one of the most important and prestigious institutions in the field of futures studies of the whole world, the University of Turku. She also talks about education in general, education in Finland, and especially stressing out the fact that in Finland, future literacy is a very important part of education programs from the most basic levels. Christina also talks about the importance of thinking about future generations and the importance of human connections in the future of the planet and the future of mankind. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did, and I'll see you very soon. So thank you very much again, Christina. And I wanted to talk to you this day because, well, you're a futurist and you are just finishing your studies, your master's studies at the University of Turku. And I want you to talk to us about that. But before that, why don't you tell us what do you do, Christina? Who are you, and what have you been doing lately?
Okay, well, my name is Kristiina Paju, like you introduced me already. I'm an Estonian by birth, and I have been living here in Finland already for more than 10 years now.
Hmm.
Um, I'm also a mom. I have 4 children, so I'm busy after work and after studies as well. So keeping myself busy, so to speak. But otherwise, I'm a quite a curious soul. I like to investigate different things and phenomena in the world and try to understand what causes them. And I'm especially interested in the human nature, connecting the psychology part of like understanding of the future and seeing, like imagining the future and how they connect into a entity inside of us actually. So that kind of, I'm just curious about human nature and how we understand future and connecting this with past and present as well, and different cultural context as well.
I see. Originally,
So
what's your profession, Christina? Originally, your bachelor's.
my bachelor's is from educational sciences. I was supposed to become a teacher and a history teacher as such, actually. But as I moved from Estonia to Finland, then I had to kind of reconsider that career path, and which kind of led me to complete a degree in international business
Mhm.
in here in Finland at first, and then building upon that, I applied to the future studies master's program in the University of Turku because I wished to learn more about sustainable development. I think in 2015 that was actually one of my core interests,
Mhm.
sustainable development, and how to, and I was kind of investigating how can I learn more about sustainable development. And then I discovered that, wow, where can I learn sustainable development in Turku? And then I discovered future studies. So one thing led to another. So
Mhm.
it wasn't like that I was at first like, wow, future studies, that's something I would like to learn or do, or, but one thing led to another. They are deeply connected, like sustainable development in its core. We are aiming to create a better world for the future generations. So they are deeply intertwined in their nature, both sustainable development and future studies.
Mhm.
So they're both cross-disciplinary fields and very hands-on in its core. So
It's
they kind of,
it's very interesting because crossing from education
mm,
to futures studies, I think it's a very interesting crossover, and I think they are very related. Um, what do you think about that?
you are absolutely right about that they are interrelated because teaching in its very core is a very futures-oriented profession. And unfortunately, it's also a field that is sometimes stuck maybe in the institutional kind of setting, that things are being done like they have been done in the past, and it's like stiff bureaucracy. You can't really redesign the educational system just like that because you would like to achieve a different result for the future. But it's something that is evolving, and they are closely intertwined. That in that sense you are right, and teachers are teaching the future generation, the future specialists, to be able to create their own best future when they graduate, for example, from high school or from basic school or university, like in my case. So they are all preparing you for the future. That's what's the common thread in both of these. But there
Exactly.
are some changes, differences as well.
In Well, we have been looking lately that futures literacy is a concept that has been around, and I think we all have been noticing the importance of futures literacy all around the world. Not only us who are dedicated to this, but some other people. And I think in this sense, Finland in general has been a pioneer about futures literacy. Uh, what have you seen in your experience in Finland about futures literacy in general since you arrived there and right now? What do you see about that?
I see that like future studies and thinking about the future in general has been much more highlighted in the society and in the media right now. For example, like if we think back, let's say 5, 6, 7 years, maybe it wasn't that like that strongly emphasized in the societal discussion, maybe. But right now, I think it is all the time in some level. The discussion is like higher on the priority list to kind of think about the future and developing the kind of understanding of where we would like to go as a society and as a country and so forth. And I've seen that also in the practical level, because some of my colleagues from the University of Turku, they have actually created this Futures Day initiative, which was piloted in 2018, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
And they got, for example, exactly teachers and schools involved at first. Like they created a guidebook for teachers on how to address future studies, how to work with futures with their students and pupils and kids in general, and gave them those guidelines and that dedicated date. I think it was 1st of March at some point, and it has been changing year after year, the date when the Futures Day is actually like held officially, but it was the start. And the next year, there were already companies and municipalities involved in organizing this Futures Day. So it has been like a rolling snowball in a way, but it started from the schools and from the teachers.
And that's something very interesting because I don't know if it happens in a lot of countries around the world. The fact that they are learning futures since they are very young, that since they're kids actually, right, in the schools.
Yeah, there have been like dedicated different activities regarding the future state, different age groups and levels. And there have been like, for example, what I have seen, they have done some artistic tasks with the smaller children, like asking them to draw a picture of a certain future, and to kind of propose them with the right kind of outlet for which is age appropriate and which kind of helps them to think about the future in an appropriate way. So we can't really expect them to 7-year-old kids, for example, to give as like as good answers about the future or imagine a different kind of futures compared to the high school students, for example. So for every kid, it has to be on their appropriate level, so to speak, so that they can give the best outcome. But they are all valuable. All the results are valuable, like depending whether you get a drawing from a 7 or 8-year-old, or then you get an essay about the state of the future or scenarios from a high school student. So they all have their value.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And how do you think it has been molding society in Finland, the fact of learning and thinking about the future since you are very young?
I think it has given the students a bit different perspective, maybe, for the children to kind of understand what future actually is, and that you are able to create your own future, and that kind of emphasizes your own responsibility in creating your future. Because I remember from my own childhood, for example, when I was at school, or when I was witnessing my own classmates at school rebel against, the school program or something. Why do we have to study this, or why do we have to do that? I'm not gonna need this, or whatever.
Mhm.
That kind of attitude, like like why am I doing this? I'm not gonna need that. But instead, kind of accept that, acknowledge that you are the creator of your future straight from the beginning, and that you can learn from everything what you're like supposed to learn, even though you're not, maybe you can't see the possibility or opportunities right now when you're studying this, for example, maths or some foreign language. But if you can kind of project that those skills, what kind of value they might actually provide you in 10 or 20 or 30 years time, then you kind of get a totally different perspective of why are you doing this. And I think it's really important from a really early age to kind of have that idea, even as a kid, we all have goals. We all want to become, some want to become astronauts
Mhm.
or firefighters, whatnot. So that kind of thinking must be encouraged, and teachers can then give the right kind of tools to say that, okay, if you want to become a firefighter, what kind of things you need, and you need to know and do, and imagine what kind of perspectives like you can have in the future. So they are closely intertwined, and I think that it's beneficial that kids know about the futures and can kind of see themselves as those active futures agents who can actually create their own future and are not dependent on what the society tells you to become, or family tells you that you're not, you're supposed to become a doctor, or whatnot, or that you can't become a doctor because you're from a certain background. You're not like cut out to become somebody who you wish to be. But everybody has the chance to become who they want to be, and that's something that's very valuable to keep in mind. And I think future studies and futures literacy helps us to keep this faith in ourselves, and keep that goal in the future, so to speak, alive, of whom we want to become and what our potential is.
Awesome. That's just amazing. That's just amazing what you have said. Well, just uh, thinking about this, tell me, how was your experience, your own personal experience, when you first contacted Futures Studies? Was it here in Turku, or has been something that you had thought before?
No, it was all started in 2015, when I started my
Hmm.
master's studies in the field of future studies, when I actually did learn about future studies as a field. I didn't have any kind of contact to it before, unfortunately. And in a temporal way, I can say that I have been I have educated myself in history. I have that past temporal view into the past, and I have learned about media. That's about the present, and now I added the future in there as well. So I have gotten a chance to learn about the whole package during my lifetime, from past to present and to the future. So
Right.
that has been pretty awesome, I can say about that. But it was an interesting experience when I first started out, because future studies gives you that perspective, at least from our master's degree program, that when we started studying it, we got those interesting let's say, wicked problems maybe, or something to kind of project into the future, and then you had to use the futures table to analyze what the future might be and what are the drivers of change, and to have this different holistic perspective when you have to look into, okay, what kind of like political changes might happen in the future, what economic changes might happen, what cultural and ecological and so forth, to have this kind of holistic lens through which you are observing something, that is a really eye-opening experience. As somebody, as for me, it was really eye-opening, because at first it's like everybody, we come from a certain kind of bubble. You have this tendency to kind of view the world like we used to, and based on our experiences and so forth. But then, if you're actually presented with a totally new framework, like totally new way of reviewing your like life or your some problems in your future, then that's totally eye-opening experience.
Of course, I see. I see. And what were the courses that you liked the most, and what did you like the most about the whole university and the whole master's program at Turku?
I think those group works, we had really many group works with different students and on our master's degree program, and that it was definitely one of the things that I enjoyed the most. But also the fact that all the students came from different backgrounds, that was something I really enjoyed as well. That there wasn't like, it's a master's degree program, so everybody has a bachelor's behind them, and everybody came from different backgrounds. There were like psychology students, there were students with business background and ecological, like sustainable development studies and cultural studies and language studies and whatnot. And to kind of having that different molding pot of those different backgrounds in a student report work, for example, that was really interesting and really it was really valuable. I can say that, because often if you work with the people with the same interest, who have the same perspective, you don't learn as much as if you work with people who come from different backgrounds, who are different from you, who have experienced different things. So that has been the best learning experience for me regarding the master's degree program, that it's international. There's people from all across the world who attend the program. They teaching language is English, of course. So everybody speaks the same language on the courses, and to get this culture experience as well, that you have to work and get across with different cultures, and you have to make yourself understandable, convey the same message and work together, and also like imagine what the future of some phenomenon might be. So those have been really great experiences for me, and I can honestly recommend my master's degree program, and I'm about to graduate in 3 days time. So I did thank you. So I managed to finally do my thesis and represent that and get all the credit points, and now I can call myself futurist.
You are right now, but you just finished your master thesis, as you say. What is it about?
Yeah. So my master's thesis aim was to kind of explore the images of the future of the Estonian education, and that from the perspective of both teachers as well as from the kind of national level visions or strategies, as well as the global level strategy or vision that's being communicated. So I kind of study what kind of are there differences, and in those visions, that how Estonian teachers see how the Estonian education develops into the future. Are there differences how the teachers, as the representative of the grassroots level or local level, how do they see the future if compared to the national level strategy or vision for Estonian education? And then I had this OECD's learning framework and the education vision for 2030 as well to compare it with. And I did that kind of small study into that. And at first I also researched like the ideas of what Estonian teachers have about the future of Estonian education by 2040. So we took a bit further away the time frame than the comparison visions that we had. But
And
it was an interesting,
what
yeah.
did you find? What did you find, and what can you say us about that?
I think teachers pretty much are on the same level as with the kind of how the educational like policymakers are on the national and global level. But of course the grassroots practitioners, they see things maybe a bit differently than those who are like every day working with the higher level policies and so forth. Basically, overall, they have the same kind of understanding that we have to kind of, that every student pretty much is appreciative of the ecological responsibility, for example, that we are responsible, and schools are following the sustainable development guidelines and frameworks, and that people are working together more, that learning is project based, as well as there is an entrepreneurial mindset among the pupils as well, that they are kind of learning a bit different way than they are doing like today, or maybe not today as such, because that study itself was done in 2019, pre-COVID times. So then it was, I can bring that one up because that's a pretty cool point. I think that teachers were actually visioning Skype real-time classes as something that would be norm in the future, and that a year later that they were actually, everybody was pushed into actually be like taking their classes online just like that. And it's like amazing, like realizing the power of what this futures work actually has, that if you imagine something, you can't really be sure that it doesn't happen tomorrow. But if you have already imagined it, even though if you think it happens in 2040, if you already imagine that, okay, we might have online classes for children as a norm, so to speak, then you are kind of prepared for it to happen if you have thought about it or envisioned it. If compared to that if you haven't actually thought about that kind of possibility, or that it could happen in the future, then and you're just thrown into this, like many teachers were back in a year ago. So so I
Yeah,
think there's a value of kind of visioning things happening before they do, because you are kind of mentally prepared if they actually realize, if compared to those people who had not envisioned those things.
exactly. The importance of visions of the future that you just
Mm.
experienced in this case, in this particular case, and I think yeah, it happened everywhere. I think now
Mm.
with COVID, as you say, we had to experience a lot of things that we thought were going to happen in very well into the future, but it happened today because of COVID, and I think this is one example that you just saw.
Hmm. Exactly. And that as futurists have been foreseeing some kind of pandemic already for years and years, that it might happen, that some kind of virus X is coming, for example, and what kind of, so there is the value of that kind of foresight and envisioning the futures that I think should be utilized more in the societal sense as well. And if futures literacy could become like one part of our normal skill set, that we
Mhm.
are all having those tools of how to envision the future, and why, and common understanding of why is it important to envision different kind of alternatives for our future. So I think that can help us humans to become more resilient to change. We are
Mhm.
not taken aback if something happens because we have already considered it.
Sure.
Like, So that kind of things, I think they're really valuable.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. You know, well, congratulations again because you finished your masters, and
Thank you.
you're going to present your masters in to a jury or something like that.
And no, I didn't have to do that,
Okay.
thankfully.
Right.
I have that same experience from my bachelor's from Tallinn University, where I had to present it in front of a jury and
Okay.
wait for feedback. But in this master's degree program, it's a bit more simpler than that. That there were two evaluators and they gave their feedback, and I just had to accept it.
Great.
And I was happy with the results,
Of
so
course.
no problems there.
And well, I think it has to be a great experience to have studied future studies at Turku, which of course is one of the main schools teaching futures all around the world. I think it's one of the main programs, one of the best programs. And I have realized in the last months that actually there are not a lot of schools around the world teaching futures studies, and you just studied in one of the main schools, and that's something that I've been thinking about. What do you think about the fact that there are not a lot of schools teaching um, programs in future studies? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think there's definitely potential there to have more schools teach future studies, because I think if we move in Finland, at least, like if we think from the perspective that futures literacy and futures competence is something that should be taught already to like preschool kids, or kids in the like different in the school setting, then why isn't there enough programs that are actually dedicated to future studies? So that's a good question, like why isn't there enough, the more programs than those selected ones? I think in USA they do have a program in Hawaii, I think, or a research center, and then they have in Copenhagen
Yeah,
something as well, but that there are not that many. That you're right about that, and I've been wondering the same thing, because but I think my opinion why it is so right now is that it's such a new discipline. It's just that future studies as an academic discipline like began started in after the Second World War, so it's really new as a field. So that might be one of the reasons why there aren't that many programs around right now, that it's not acknowledged yet as the more traditional or different disciplines that have been around for a longer time, for example, like history, for example.
hmm,
That's like normal for us, and at very long has been around for a very long time. But I think that's the reason, because the discipline itself is kind of, it's new, even though the elements of the future studies, they have always been inside of the human consciousness. We're always thinking about the future one way or another, but I think it might be the problem that it's so new as a discipline, and it's so familiar to us to think about the future in a way, because we tend short term, we tend to, everybody thinks about their future, but not envisioning the long term. So there's a difference there regarding the scope of what we are kind of envisioning the future is for. But that might be one reason that we think it's something that everybody does, like we all think about the future. And then I've come across that as well, that it's not known, the profession of futurists is not known among, for example, companies or the society in general everywhere, for example. And that can of course backlash on that as well, the evolving of the different evolving the different master's degree programs, for example, for future studies, is because if it's not acknowledged as a profession, or if the scientific field is not acknowledged as well as, for example, more traditional fields are, then that creates this kind of problem that
hmm.
you know that some people, decision makers, they can't see the added value of why should we have that kind of program,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah, but I think this is changing, and hopefully we will have more formal studies in future studies. I think, well, what we are doing here, in my case, in Latin America, I think this is part of the effort we are trying to start, just uh, getting into formal future studies in future literacy and
Mm-hmm.
trying to spread the word with people. And yeah, definitely. And as you say, well, in for instance, in North America and the United States, there's Hawaii, there's Houston, um,
Mm.
and some other regions of the world. Well, in Europe, in Australia, South Africa. I think here in Latin America, let me tell you, we have some degrees here in Mexico, in my country, but also in
Yeah.
Colombia, in Argentina, and in Costa Rica, they have opened a graduate degree, for instance. And I think this is something that's
Wow.
growing just little by little. And
Let's hope so.
yeah, yes, we say, because you said something really, really interesting and important, that maybe we all think about the future all the time. I think we all do that, but
Mm.
we are not that conscious about it. We are not that aware, and sometimes we don't know what to do with that. We just think about the future, but then what? And I think that's something that future studies can help you with.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you 100% on that. That futures consciousness, and like consciously thinking about the future is a different thing than just living living in this scope of that we understand what tomorrow might bring. Or there is a difference, definitely. And I can see also the value of why we should study the ideas of people about their futures and kind of combine them into those kind of analyses, is because then we actually know how people review, how they see the world, how they see that the future will be like. And if there's nobody to do that, we don't really know, like, what kind of directions should we take, what kind of alternatives are there regarding the future developments, if you don't ever ask. And not many people ask, like, what do you think, what is the future, like, do you understand what future is? Like, not many people ask that from themselves, or not from anybody else either in that case, I mean. So it's somewhat like, it's very human nature to think about the future, but at the same time doing that consciously and in an organized manner and in a holistic way is totally, it's a profession, in its sense.
Of course, and yeah, I think this is gonna be changing, hopefully, and well, more programs everywhere in the world. Here in America, I mean, Brazil, Peru as well. I don't wanna
Great.
just say one country. I think I'm sure there are a lot of efforts everywhere, and I think this is gonna be even bigger because we are realizing of the importance of thinking about the future and studying about the future, and
Mhm.
what to do right now in the present, which is, I think, different,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly. And I'm really looking forward to seeing those positive developments kind of take off, and more people understanding the value of thinking about the future, and kind of knowing, like, that we all have in our power to create our future, and all this added value that you can get if you can kind of envision your future in alternatives, and if you know, like, what kind of options you have, that you're not putting all your eggs in your one basket,
Yeah,
you know,
right, right.
because it makes us more resilient. And due to the pandemic and due to all things what are going on in the world right now regarding those political movements and more populist parties rising, like, in different corners of the world. So these are gaining more and more importance to kind of understand, like, how to understand what is going on in the world. What do we want from our future? What is the good future? I also see that really good, like takeaway from the future studies from myself as a futurist is that the ethical part, the morals that
Right.
this entails, like after graduating now, or I will graduate soon, but after I become like a futurist, like accredited academically trained futurist, so to speak, it's
Mhm.
like I also have this ethical responsibility. I have this ethical moral code in me that I should stand up for the future generations and their well-being, because they don't have a voice. But as futurists, we are the whistleblowers. We should be able to speak our mind and say that, okay, what kind of developments like are happening right now, if they are not really creating the best outcome for the future generations, then we should be able to talk about these things and kind of be the whistleblowers in the society and kind of highlight that, okay, this is maybe not okay what you are planning for.
Mhm.
Like, I think that's something that I personally have gotten from the degree program is that responsibility for future generations, and kind of, you know, that I'm not here just for standing out for myself, but I also have to take in the bigger picture, what is going on in the world and what kind of world are we leaving behind if we leave. So nobody is living like forever, and and all the decisions should be made keeping that long-term impacts in mind as well, that we are
Absolutely.
just not. Yep.
I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that is something that should be taken into account always, the long-term implication, like impacts of decisions that are being made versus the short-term ones. We can see the companies are making their decisions sometimes based on just reviewing for quarterly what are the profits of some actions, that they want quarterly profit out of something, but they don't really see the bigger picture. They are just focused like like those horses they have, those,
Mhm.
what the blinds on, just focused on getting this one result and short-term success, and that's all. But as futurists, we see that there's more than that that should be taking into account where we are.
Yeah, what you are saying is that a- a- I am glad that you highlighted that being a futurist is also a responsibility, because we have the responsibility for not only futurists but everybody. But we are
Mm,
very aware of that. That we have the responsibility for future generations uh, who don't have a voice now. That's something that I like very much. What you just said, and also the fact that it's a collective responsibility. It's thinking about the future is not thinking about only me
mm,
and what happens around me, but what happens collectively and what's
exactly.
our role in there, right?
Mm, exactly. Like the world as a whole. Not just, of course, we can look like from different perspectives. You can just focus on the future of your own local community or your own society or your own country, or part of the, for example, European Union or Latin America, you say. You know that there are different perspectives from which you can observe the future and kind of analyze what might happen and what are the alternatives. But I think the common good for everyone is something that we all have to stand for, even if we are looking through the lens of a like smaller entity. Even then, we have to keep in mind that we have to make decisions that are just and responsible for everyone in the
Definitely,
world.
definitely. And which leads me to the next question, Christina. How has studying studies and knowing about all this discipline, how has it changed your life personally, like at a more personal level? What what has brought to you when the fact of studying and thinking about this discipline?
I think it has brought me a deeper understanding of the world its systemic and holistic nature of how we are all connected. I think that's the biggest understanding that I've gotten since starting the program and learning about future studies. Is getting the holistic perspective, and of course learning about this responsibility as well, that we all have this responsibilities to stand up, for example, for future generations. And in my personal life, I have taken on now a role in the association for families as well, and trying to kind of advocate for the well-being of families, because they are the future. The kids are the future. They're our future, and what kind of growing environment we establish for them. That's what that kind of gives the basis for what kind of people they will grow up to be, and what kind of future world citizens they will be. So that has been one key thing, that I have actually gained the courage to kind of stand up for my own family on that side, but also for the other families as well, and to kind of advocate that families should be valued and kids should be valued, and their rights for equal just life and good life should be valued as well.
That's okay. That's very, very important. And um, what would you say right now with all this COVID situation and everything? Sometimes we have talked a lot in general, not right now, but I mean in general, everybody talks about COVID, and we cannot avoid it here. But what are your perspectives now uh, for your uh, region of the world, for Europe, for the rest of the world? What is gonna, how do you visualize uh, scenarios for the future for the world, departing from now, from this different reality we have now that we are in the middle of the pandemic, and it seems like there's a light at the end of the tunnel now with the vaccines and all that. But what do you visualize for the future of the world in general after this pandemic?
I think I visualize a more connected world
Mhm.
after the pandemic, in that sense that we have learned to kind of since we have got finally like kind of experienced that, being physically kind of restricted to our social distancing and everything in place, that human connection is valuable, and connecting to each other is like, it's something that's necessary for mental well-being, is to connecting with other people across the world. So I think that aspect will surely live on in the visions and scenarios for the world after the COVID as well, that we are valuing more the connections that we have, like in the world in general, with different people across countries and in our own communities. So that is one thing. And I also think that COVID has been something that has kind of accelerated the technological
Mhm.
development and scientific development regarding this. Like one lecturer once said that for those vaccines, the speed of how they came to the market, that was fascinating. That has never happened before
Mhm.
in human history, or like that
Right.
you can that kind of medical improvements, that what is possible, that is just, I think that's just foreplay of what might happen in the future. And I think that has prepared the human population in general for what happens if a pandemic like gets like takes place, and if some kind of virus gets loose, because I think humans forgot what it was like before vaccines actually kind of tackled most of those common viruses that were circling, like in the beginning of this 20th century, and before that were killing populations. And I think humans maybe kind of lost guard,
Mhm.
but in a way it has, I envision that in the future after COVID, we will be more resilient. That as well, that we have actually learned the lesson in that sense, that we now know what to value in that kind of situations, where to turn to, what are the maybe where are the solutions, where should we look for the solutions. That will be something, I think, that will arise out of this situation, and humans might be more and more resilient and ready to kind of find the solutions if that kind of situation ever happen again. So we know what to do because we have recently gone through that. And as we all know, that with the climate change, the probability of another pandemic happening, of some kind of other virus arising, is pretty high. Mm-hmm. And if we have already this experience like from 2020 and this year as well, so we will be ready, more ready. We'll never be totally ready, because I think no matter how hard you prepare, you will always be kind of taken aback by surprise if something happens. But I think it will help the transition to find the solutions and to find the cures and to ensure that our populations will be healthy and have the good future overall.
Okay, that's a great vision. And what would be your preferred future for in all these scenarios that I'm sure that you have thought about? Maybe what is your preferred vision of the futures for Europe, for the EU specifically, and what is your preferred future for the world in general? It's a difficult question, I know, but what do you think?
Yeah, it is a difficult question, especially since I really know what time frame to like. Right. What are the lens? What year we are talking about?
I don't know. Just tell us
2000.
What year do you like? And
okay, so
2000, right. Let's say 2041, 20 years from now. Not that
okay. Not that long. That's a really short time span. Not many things will happen, but you know, the way that technology is like developing and accelerated change in overall situation, I think for the EU, if I think about how things are going now, the preferred future, you've said, I think it should be everybody like happily coexisting in their national countries, fighting for the common goals. Of course, I would like to see the positive outcomes always. That's something that's my preferred futures are like, that they are usually positive and dealing with sustainable development, that we are actually achieving all these SDGs and we have tackled the climate change. But I think there might be overly positive outlooks for the future, but I keep hoping that might still happen, that there has been a change to circular economy by 20 years time, that we are more valuing like ecological aspects of life, like we are taking care of our nature, our biodiversity, and kind of returning to our roots, so to speak, that we are allowed to kind of grow our own food and be connected to the nature like we've always been, but because of the urbanization that has been sometimes forgotten, like kids don't know where the eggs or the milk comes from. So that kind of, sometimes in some factors I would envision that we would return to the roots, but at the same time we are using the technology to its highest potential and are connected and living happily together in this EU setting, and the same way for the whole world as well, I think. 20 years, this is a really short time, but there are developments, and the bigger countries are showing the way to like in the fight with the climate change, to kind of slow down the emissions and to kind of achieve the goals that have been set. So that might happen. I am positively hoping in my preferred future that we can achieve those goals that we have set in a globally together with all the countries, that we can stop climate change from happening. But of course, that is to be seen what happens. But
Right.
let's be positive about it.
Right. And I like the fact that you highlight that 20 years is a very short period of time, especially when you are a futurist and you are used to work with longer, much longer horizons in time. And I think it's very good because it leads me to my next question. We're almost ending now, but my next question has to be with uh, I really want to know your opinion about what happens here in Latin America. Let me tell you something. In general, I think in this region of the world, we are not very used to think about the future in terms of planning, or in terms of projecting, or in terms of having a vision of what future we want. As you said, we think a lot about the future, but that's something.
Exactly.
But it's not what we mean in future studies. Like, okay, uh, we think about the future, but we don't have, I think that's my opinion, we don't have a very clear vision of the future we want, or why do we want that future, or something that has always made some noise in my mind is like, in this region of the world, a lot of countries, we speak the same language, we have the same culture in general, we like same kind of food, and still we we have a lot of problems when we want to work together to reach a goal. And of course, in terms of reaching a common vision of the future, that I have always thought at the EU, it has happened, not without problems, but it happened. And you had this vision of the future you wanted, and you did it. And what would you say to people here in my region, in Latin America in general, about the importance of building a common vision of the future, or thinking about the future, or futures literacy in general, thinking about the future? What would you say to people on this side of the world?
I would say to you that please do envision, please do utilize the futures, the opportunities and skills that you have inside you to think about the future in a conscious way, because they give you the different alternatives, and you can always find the common ground and the common language if things are being communicated the best way. And I think the solutions to that you pointed out, that there's not often a dialogue between different countries, and that is kind of missing. So I think that should start from the grassroots level of the NGOs, of the activists, connecting and kind of like starting this snowball effect as well, to actually kind of educating what we are talking about here. Like, what is future studies, and why is it important, and why should we do that? Why should we think about the future in a conscious way? So that is something that has to be kept in mind. And I think everybody has it in them, but there is a need, obviously, for more human connection, for sharing this understanding of how I envision the future, how you envision the future, and what are those overlapping themes, or what do we have in common, what we would like to achieve, like what's the compromise there. So that kind of things can be done in a participatory way, by involving everybody in the dialogue as well. But how to actually pull it off, that's a different question, because there's so many countries, because everybody has their own vision of what their country, if they have strong national identity, for example, that I want my country to succeed and everybody else not maybe so much, or you never know what the situation is there. But we all have those kind of loyalty things going on when we are talking about international cooperation and finding the common ground. But the first step, of course, should be starting from the national context. And I know first step should be a local context, that there should be local level, like futures activities happen. Then we move on to the national level, and then we move to the international, where we actually are doing work together for the common good for the region or the whole area, Latin America. So that might work, but it has to be a participatory process, that everybody should feel that they have a voice. I think that is the thing. Maybe there hasn't been possibilities to express themselves right now in those countries. So, or to feel safe, there has to be a safe space, I think, established, where you can actually say, because there are those negative. You can have the futures that you're terribly scared of, or you can envision things happening that the other person says, oh no, I would never in 100 years see that kind of things would happen in my future. And to kind of have the safe space to express oneself, whatever the fears or hopes are for their future, and not really like, it has to be safe. The space has to be safe, where you can have like express and envision the futures. And after you have created that kind of space, then from there the collaborative and participatory approach becomes much more easier, if there's a safe space to express oneself.
Right.
I don't know, is that any use?
No, that's
I
right.
think,
You have stressed out all the time, and I like that very much. Connections. Connections is some concept. It's a concept that you have stressed out very much, and I
yeah,
think it's very important. Connection, and as you said, participatory attitude and participatory involvement.
yeah, and dialogues,
Right.
just to
Dialogue, of course.
have that back and forth experience, that somebody is listening. Because of course I can share my experiences as well, what I think the future will be like, but if I feel like that nobody actually listens to what I have to say, then people often tend to kind of shut down, not are not willing to think about the future. Because I think one concept that came across a couple of days ago was mental exhaustion, from a book from a friend, a futurist friend, was sharing on LinkedIn that. And that's a term that kind of reflects how we are so overwhelmed with our present dealings that we don't have the mental capacity to even think about the future. And that book was written, where this mental exhaustion was described, was written in 1978. 1978, and we are 2021, and it's still going on, the same situation. In a way, that if people, and there's the point there, if you are feeling overwhelmed by your everyday life, if you are exhausted, you don't have the resources to think about the future in the same way that maybe would be beneficial for you, that you might not see the alternatives if you are mentally exhausted.
Yeah.
And that is something as well, I think.
It's a great concept, because I think this is something that happens in this region, as in other regions. But I talked about this with another friend just
Mm-hmm.
couple of days ago, and it is like in my region. I mean, people live with a lot of people live with a lot of problems daily, and they have to
Exactly.
think about their daily problems, and it's very difficult to think about the future when you have to deal with this
Mm.
economic and mental exhaustion, I would say, in all these situations that you are living. And that's something that we have to work on. I mean, like, yes,
Mm.
definitely. And that's,
Creating this, to create the basic secure feeling of security,
of course,
and that remove kind of this
of course.
part of this exhaustion, but it's of course something that I don't know, it can't be solved that easily. It can be solved, like Finland was trying this or testing this, that what was it called? I can't even remember now. That was a specific term, or basic income or something, that was everybody would get to like €1,000, let's say. I can't remember the exact amount of the money everybody was given, but for example, country is providing a certain amount of money to every person, no matter are they employed or unemployed or whatever they are doing. So to kind of create that sense of security, like a basis where you can start building yourself up from, and that might be one pilot that might be tested elsewhere as well. I don't know. Of course, it's like depends. It depends if the future visions are of a flourishing country and happy citizens and everybody like being happy and working together and so forth. And I think that is something to keep in mind from the national or country perspective as well. How to create that every citizen feels safe, secure, that their needs are being cared for without them having to survive like day-to-day basis. And that kind of if you're surviving, if you're just barely surviving in your everyday life, then you can't see the alternatives or the opportunities or the potential that you have. Like I said, you are exhausted, you don't have the capacity to become more that you actually are. but you're kind of kept down in the situation that's not really fair and not in your control. And that's the worst part of it, that people are in the uncertainty, and if you feel that you are in a situation and you don't have control over it, that there's nothing that you can do to make it better. And these are very, very sad situations, and I think they definitely affect how people are thinking about the future and see their possibilities and the common future as well.
And that's something that we have to do here, like and that's something that I also like a lot about future studies, that you are always thinking about alternatives and possibilities, and we have to work to give more alternatives and possibilities to people to so they can think about and a good future for them and their families and their surroundings. So yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, Kristiina. And just we're almost done now. And what are your future projects? What are you working on now? Now that you finished your master's, what are you going to do, Kristiina?
Well, that's a good question. I continue working as project officer, most likely, in the sustainable urban development projects, as I've been doing so for the past 5 years already. But at the same time, I think I'm trying to step into the role of a futurist more concretely. And I was kind of trying to launch my own initiatives in the beginning of this year. Regarding future studies and teaching people to become more futures literate and more resilient to change. But due to time constraints and the master's thesis that had to be ready by a deadline, so I kind of buried those ideas for a while, but I might get back to this. And I have also an upcoming project. I don't know if I guess I can talk about it, but I might give some lecture on a local level here in Finland as well about importance of future studies and foresight. So I'm trying to kind of take steps towards becoming a professional futurist, so to speak, to actually work with the area. Sorry for that.
No problem. No problem. That's great. That's a great goal, and you are a professional futurist. So just you don't I mean, you don't, you are getting your title, but still you are a futurist. You know a lot
Thank
about
you.
this. You have been studying about this, and I'm very sure that you are going to do a lot of things with this interest and these professional studies you got now about the future. And I'm very glad that we had this conversation, Christina. I'm very thankful for you. I appreciate your time, and it was a very nice conversation. Really, we talked of a lot of
Thank
things,
you.
and I don't know if there's anything else you want to say before we finish. Something that I didn't ask you, and please let us know how we can contact you over social media or whatever you want. Just let us know, and I will write your contact details around here,
Okay.
and please let us know if there's something else that I didn't ask you that you would like to say before we finish.
I think we have discussed most of the topics, and of course there are so many aspects that can be still further discussed regarding the situation in the world, and in the different regions, and the futures and the alternatives and so forth. But I think that's a good start. We can continue the discussions in one way
Definitely.
or another and have a podcast. Like, that was one of my initiatives as well, but that one kind of died
I
in the beginning.
know. I know you have
Yeah.
you have to follow Christina at least. I mean, on Twitter, on LinkedIn as well, and she's very active and she has a lot of ideas. She's gonna do her podcast. I'm very sure. You just started, but you must continue with that.
Okay, I'll try to. I'll try to. I have a lot of ideas, but let's see if we can actually now allocate more time to develop them further and do the podcast and have you there talking about the futures of Latin America
I
and
know.
Mexico and your experiences as well, because I really appreciate this opportunity of being able to chat with you, and thank you for reaching out to me, because I know I've been super busy with the thesis and with family and with work and every whatnot, but
No,
persistence leaves the results. So
and that's
yes.
why I'm very happy. I know you got a lot of things and a lot of work, and I really wanted to have this conversation with you, and it was a very rich conversation. You told us a lot of very important things and concepts, and I think it can help a lot of people here. As you know, as I told you, this conversation is going to be uploaded first, like in this in English, but
Mhm.
we are going to subtitle our conversation in Spanish, so
Great.
many people can have the chance to know about this, and the language is not a barrier. So I am really thankful. So we can reach you
Thank you.
on your social media. So Twitter, LinkedIn, and what else?
Twitter and LinkedIn, I think these are the
Okay.
best channels to reach me. And of course, you can check out the podcast as well if you're interested to listen to a couple of
Yeah.
episodes that I have recorded. And it's called Futuro Resilient Podcast.
Mhm.
And yeah, thank you.
No,
And
thank you, and I will also write the link for your podcasting here, so we can be very attentive for
great.
what for us. And thank you very much, Christina, again. And
Thank
we'll
you.
see you very soon. Hopefully, this is not the last time. I know it's not going to be the last time. And thank you very much. And thank you very much, everybody. We'll see you very,
Thank you.
very soon.
Thank you, Mauricio.
Thank you, Christina.
Gracias.